This is also very near and dear to my heart, and that is that emotional design matters. And what I mean by that is it's very important to be paying attention to the emotional state of the player as they're playing the game and as they're encountering things in the game. And in a lot of cases, that's more important than sort of the mechanical design or in some cases even the high-level balance. So one thing that we've discovered is very often there's emotion in unintended places that as a game developer certainly we don't necessarily, or I often don't think about and should think about more. And so for instance, a moment of high emotion that's going to probably be higher emotion than anything else a player will encounter in your game is when they run into the server being down, or there being an error message, or a number of things like that are not things that normally we design for, but I think it's pretty important to pay attention to, sort of the emotional state. And this is actually an example of where we changed the game a little bit to make the emotion of the game better. So this is our spinner, and this comes up whenever you're doing matchmaking, and it has a bunch of funny things that it says, and it always ends up on, well, back in the day it always ended up on a perfect opponent. And when you actually play the game after you're matched with this opponent, sometimes it is a blowout, whether it's because they got good cards or you got bad cards or they're a better player than you. There's all kinds of reasons why it could be a blowout, even if it was a pretty good match. But what that means is early on a player would see a perfect opponent, get blown out in the match, and go, I'm super pissed at Blizzard. This makes me angry because it said a perfect opponent, and this did not feel like a perfect opponent. And so we actually just changed the text to read a worthy opponent because it changed qualitatively sort of the emotional response. I mean, it's still never fun to get blown out, but it was qualitatively better just changing the wording and setting the expectation slightly differently. We also do a lot of design for emotion. This is a discard from the physical WoW trading card game, discard card, and this is a mechanic that we actually don't do any of in Hearthstone because the effect of playing discard and certain other types of mechanics on your opponent is super disheartening. It sort of makes your opponent feel powerless. And it's sort of a weird state, actually, because it's fun to play discard decks, and counterspell decks is another type of deck that we're not really supporting, or resource destruction, all of those things. It's fun to play those, but it's not fun to have those played against you. And we felt like the emotional negativity that came from having that played against you was so strong that we didn't feel like that we could really include those mechanics in our game. And it's actually, in some cases, a problem for us because there are certain types of decks in the metagame that it would be useful if we had discard as a tool to put in players' hands to deal with sort of those types of decks. But the emotional negativity is so strong, so we're just not going to do it. We're designing for emotion and just taking those straight out. We also do a lot of balance for emotion. A significant number of our changes over the last 6 months or so have been made actually for emotional responses and emotional feedback rather than like high-level balance thoughts. And Mind Control is one of those cards that we changed. It's a card that when you play it, you take an opponent's minion and put it onto your side, and now you own it. And the emotional response to that is very strongly negative. And we heard all these people complaining everywhere, oh my god, Mind Control is too powerful, I can't play against it, it's the strongest card in the game. And we looked at the numbers, and it was just fine. The card was not an overpowered card. The problem with the card is it felt super bad to have it played against you, so we actually increased the cost of the card significantly to make it so that it would be seen less sort of in the game as a whole, that it's more of a niche card, even though from a pure balance point of view we didn't have to make any changes to it. It was just an emotionally balanced card, or an emotionally unbalanced card, I guess, that we felt like we needed to change. Also, one thing that was pretty interesting that we talked a lot about when we were designing the game is when do we provide the audio and visual feedback to support specific emotions. So when we were first building the game, our artists were working on the effects of attacking, and they're like, we're going to make this awesome effect when my minion crashes into the enemy hero or your minion. It's going to be super cool. And after we talked about it for a while, we realized that while the attack is a very important moment narratively, like in a movie, whatever, that is going to be the high moment of emotional, impact. In Hearthstone, by the time something's attacking, you probably actually know what it's going to be attacking. Or if you don't, you're like, he could attack this or this. Yeah, he attacked that. It's not emotionally high moment. So instead what we did is instead of focusing our audio and visual effects there as much, we focused a lot more on summoning cards into play, because actually the high emotional moment in a game of Hearthstone is when my opponent first puts something into play, because it could be anything. It could change the game entirely, and you just have no idea. So that's the moment of tension. What are they going to play? What are they going to play? Oh my goodness, it was, Ragnaros or whatever it was. So just for us, focusing our visual attention on the emotional moments that were actually relevant to the specific game were important.